Hi guys, it's Harry here, your favourite film nerd, and today is something a little bit different. I had a great conversation with James Mansell about his new short film called Leviathan. Again, thank you so much for James for coming to chat with me. It was such a cool chat talking about creativity and just the creation of his new short film centering around Jack the Ripper.
Was this unfortunate woman an acquaintance of yours?
I just want to give you props that I watched it again this morning and it's so good. It's so good.
Oh,
No, 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 well done you and everyone involved. Um yeah. It's really yeah, I've got notes here. Yeah, it was really yeah, it's a gorgeous looking film.
no.
Um
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. Yeah, I
gorgeous looking
agree.
film.
I'm so happy with how it turned out. It is nice to, yeah. And I think the fact that it's all in one room, like I think it
Hmm.
needs to look, you need to enjoy being in that space with those people in that room because you don't get to go anywhere else. So, no, I was really
Yeah.
happy with how the whole thing turned out.
Yeah, did you want to just give just like tell us what the film is about in a nutshell
Yeah.
first?
So Leviathan is a it's a short film based on a book called A Knife in the Fog, which was written by a lovely fella called Bradley Harper. The film is it's set in Whitechapel during the Whitechapel murders, the end of the autumn of 1888, the autumn of terror, as it became known. The scene in the film. Basically, we arrive midway through a story that seems already to be in full flow, with three characters in the mortuary with the body of the fourth victim of Jack the Ripper, who was a lady called Catherine Eddowes, who is had been currently has quite recently been murdered, and we find three characters: Margaret Harkness, who was a radical, real person, a radical liberal who wrote a lot of books around the time, and she is in the room with Arthur Conan Doyle, who's a young GP at the time, who obviously goes on to write Sherlock Holmes, and his professor and mentor, guy called Professor Joseph Bell, and they are in the room, and the three of them, basically have to find common ground with their different perceptions of the murder and society and what was happening to women at the time and poverty and the East End of London, and so lots of different areas that they're all coming at from different perspectives, and they have to somehow find common ground and in a very small way move the case forwards, and then
Hmm.
they realize by the end of the scene that they are able to probably go on and work together, and yeah, and the book is basically the full story of the three of them and how they ultimately end up catching Jack the Ripper, which obviously is fiction. Yeah, so it's a little snapshot of that wider story.
Yeah, no, I have to say that the film the three actors in it are such a great threesome. They have a great back and forth with one another. Um, yeah, and sorry, I'm absolutely terrible with names, but the main actress, she's like an absolute powerhouse.
Yeah, Lauren
She
Cunningham.
like yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. She puts several times in the film, she like puts them in their place, doesn't she?
yeah,
And I loved that. And the way that the Arthur Conan Doyle and uh, the 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 other gentleman in the scene is your great
he
great
is.
grandfather,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
great, great,
tell
great.
me about that. Tell me about that because
Yeah,
that was
so Joseph Bell was a surgeon. He was also a professor, a lecturer at Edinburgh University. He is related to me. He was my great great great. Oh, I've frozen. Can you hear me?
yeah. Yeah,
So
it's right,
yeah,
you're
he
back.
is he's my great 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 three greats grandfather. He Arthur Conan Doyle studied at Edinburgh University, and Joseph Bell was his lecturer. And Joseph Bell apparently had a way of working with the students, and when there was a medical case or a sort of something to solve, he had a way of deducing what was really happening, and he used to apparently play tricks on students where he would already know that they had a sibling, and they would come in and he would say, oh, I can see by the jacket you've chosen to wear that you have an older brother. And a lot of it was actually a bit of fun, but
Yeah,
Conan Doyle got quite inspired by this. And when quite a few years later, when he decided to start writing this Sherlock Holmes, he based the deducive detective side, not Holmes's personality, not his sort of
yeah,
not the
yeah,
drug addict and all that, but the way that he would try and solve a problem he based on Joseph Bell. So the book, that's the reason I was involved with the project, is because had a I have a weird interest with Jack the Ripper, as lots of people seem to have, and I wanted to read some fiction. I've read sort of factual books, but I thought I'm sure there's a whole subgenre of people have written stories about Jack the Ripper, fiction
yes,
stories, and they probably like figure out the ending or they come up with their own idea. And I found one called A Knife in the Fog, which was there's been one murder, which was Annie Chapman, and the basically Scotland Yard says, well, have you read this story called A Study in Scarlet, which was the first Sherlock Holmes story, and said, well, who wrote that? Because surely whoever came up with such a detective could help us. And they ring up Arthur Conan Doyle, and they get him to come, and they say, "Can you come down and help?" And in the book, he says, I'm not the one. I'm not the detective. I based that on my professor. You should get him as well." So then that's why Joseph Bell comes down
ah,
as
okay,
well. And then while they're there, they meet Margaret Harkness, who knows the East End very well, and she was very, very involved with the people and the women in Whitechapel. So that the reason I originally read the book is because of that connection, and I sent Brad a message and said, I'm reading your book. Your character, one of your main characters, is my great 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 grandfather, which he was delighted to hear, and so that's kind of
yeah,
how we started that sort of relationship. But and it's not actually so far fetched, because Joseph Bell was actually consulted in reality by Scotland Yard, and there is reports of him actually having input on the case, because he was very famous. He was Queen Victoria's. Whenever he was in London, Queen Victoria would always get him to be her doctor. Basically, he was
oh
basically
wow,
the Queen's preferred um, medical assistance. So it's kind of just, and Arthur Conan Doyle, obviously, he was 29 during the Whitechapel murders. So it's really just taking a few people and going, well, they could have come together. They all could have done this. Um,
yeah,
Margaret Harkness never wrote about Jack the Ripper, but her most famous book, called In Darkest London, which the quote at the beginning of the film is from the book, was written the year after
yeah,
the
yeah,
Whitechapel murders. So it was a lot of fun to direct Matthew Lloyd Davies playing my own great 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 granddad.
yeah, yeah,
And my
yeah,
dad came to the screening and he met Brad, and and we've
yeah.
grown up
So like
knowing kind of who Joseph Bell was, and thinking, oh, who, this sort of person in our lives that and all my family seem to think that he is depicted in the film how they think he was. And they look really similar as well, which is fun. So yeah, that's a fun connection with the story and the
Oh,
project.
well, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a huge compliment that your or like all your family say. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
this feels like work. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, did you find in terms of like casting him, did you find how was the casting process with finding these three
Yeah.
key characters in this?
So the casting was different for each one of them. So when Brad decided to go ahead with this project, he had two conditions. One was that he wrote the screenplay himself. So that was
Fair
so
enough.
we didn't need a writer. And the other one was that Matthew Lloyd Davies played Joseph Bell. So he was cast from the beginning. Matthew Lloyd Davies is a good close friend of Brad. He narrates the audiobook. If you listen to A Knife on the Fog in
Mm.
on Audible or wherever, it's him voicing it.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
so Brad always thought, well, Matt can play Bell. So there was no, and he was great. He's very involved with the project. He's followed. The book was published in 2019, so he's sort of followed the story and the journey. So he was. That's the thing with any of these sorts of projects. Everyone involved has to. You would rather get someone who was very invested and very passionate and wants the film to succeed and is curious about it over
Yes.
them being the absolute perfect person that
Mm.
could I have said no, we're going to go and cast and we're going to someone to play Joseph Bell. That's the thing when we found Rafe who plays Doyle, Rafe Bird, the idea of playing Arthur Conan Doyle is pretty attractive to actors.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely.
so we could have spent way longer searching for people, and there was a budget, so this wasn't a project where it's just like you're doing it for lunch and nothing else. Everyone was paid, so it was
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
an attractive gig for actors. But the fact that Matt was really interested and he helped us with the screenplay and he's been involved with Brad from the beginning, that was more important to have him involved. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that turned out great. Rafe Bird was cast. He was cast, and I originally went down the route of trying to go through a casting director and get this out to people that had that were attached to shows and try and get some
Mm.
noise with someone who you may have seen on the like
Yeah.
British actors
Yeah.
who appear on very popular shows in smaller parts like Bridgerton. That was taking a long time, so we at some point I decided that having someone attached to this and have them along for the journey was more important than finding someone who may have to sort of lower their expectations of the project, who kind of bring someone
Yes.
up
Yeah.
from here down to here because it's a
Yeah.
small film, and
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
find someone and give them this opportunity to really invest themselves, but isn't going to give the film the noise because it's so and so you may have seen on whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, and Rafe was ended up he was brilliant. And Lauren was a recommendation from Anthony Lynch, who was the producer, who just said, Lauren's great. You should cast her. Lauren's a producer. She makes stuff. She's very interested in the process um and she's doing great. She was just on Casualty, and she's
Yeah.
been on Called the Midwife, and she does a lot of Doctor Who audio series and
Ah,
so,
brilliant.
so
Brilliant.
yeah, so we didn't cast her. We just had a chat with her, and she got it and was interested in it. And she was also in Gavin and Stacey, the Christmas special. So yeah, we quite quickly found our three, and then it was making sure they understood the scale of the project and that their input was crucial to getting the script ready and getting their input and not just sort of saying, here's the date, here's the script, learn it.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
So yeah, all great.
Yeah.
We're really happy with them and with how it all turned out, and the process as well. Was fantastic. So yeah, we're really happy with the three.
Good. Good. Yeah. No, because you want. I think when I like direct something as well, which has been a while. I'm actually writing at the moment, so
Right.
but I would that's what I think the whole collaborative process is what you want rather than someone just showing up and doing a job
Mm.
on the day. It's way more fun to get everyone involved and say
Yeah.
everyone puts their little thing. So then it's like not to sound soppy, but then everyone's like heart and soul is
Yeah.
in it rather
Totally.
than rather than we're all just doing our own little bits and then we're all going home.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that sounds really good.
100%. That's so important to have people that having people that also understand the difficulties of this type of project. Like we didn't get to
Yes.
like one of my big things was we have enough time and enough just enough budget to have a rehearsal and to spend everyone in a room together, and it's a play essentially. So just run it through 10 times. Let's chat, let's discuss, let's do all that in person. And it never happened because of just people. We couldn't quite
Schedule.
afford to get people. Matt lives quite far away, and Rafe
Mm,
goes between London and Nottingham, and just we couldn't quite afford to reimburse and make everyone happy with getting into one place. So that
yeah.
never happened. So you sort of as an actor, you're trying to do the best work you can where without ever meeting anyone before, which
Yes, yeah, yeah.
this type of project you might expect that on a much smaller project that's small crew, small the
Mm.
scope is small. This was a bigger scope, and I hadn't met any of them before the day one, so
Ah,
you've got
okay.
to have someone who's still gonna just go, okay, well that's fine. We never got to rehearse, but I'm gonna I'm gonna turn up with loads of ideas, really prepared. I'm gonna come with suggestions and all that sort of thing. If you just turn up and you just read the lines, then that's you don't have the time to go right.
Yeah.
We're going to do this, so yeah, 100% finding, and I think that goes for everyone involved in it. People that just want to see it, they want to see the film do well and be made the best it can be made. I think with any
Mm.
small project, you can sometimes want to doing this as a favor, you know, and not that interested in how this turns out. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, and it does. It makes a massive difference.
Yeah, yeah. No. In terms of like yes, so that must have been on because how many days did you shoot the
Two,
film across?
2 days.
Two. Two.
Yeah,
Damn. That must have been intense.
it was.
Intense. Yeah.
Yeah, we were on
Because
location for three, so we had a rig day.
oh
Um,
nice. Oh
which,
that's good.
yeah, which was crucial, just because the set we had to dress. The set needed dressing more than normal. It was a sort of halfway, like um, if we hadn't dressed it, it was still period correct. There wasn't
Yeah,
too
yeah.
much needed to cover up. But it was what I really wanted to do was, and with the lighting and the way we shot it was, um, not you don't always need lots of things happening in the space. Like the location itself, is interesting and creates a sort of immersive atmosphere and ambience and feel. So and as we shot 360 degrees, you didn't need to dress for, well, we're going to go into that corner and we won't see there. So we basically just spent the production department basically just spent um the day just dressing the entire area, um
Nice.
which was an awful lot of fun. And then that day was also really helpful to work out blocking, and the first AD was there, so just figuring out like how we're going to do this and how
Yes,
do
yeah.
we get through these 2 days quite quickly. Yeah, and then it's a 15-page script. So day one was 7.5 pages, and day two was 7.5. So it was
Nice.
quite it fell out quite evenly to do it over 2 days, and I don't think we ever felt too rushed. I mean, you weren't doing more than two or three takes tops. It was
Yeah, yeah,
quite,
yeah.
we didn't have too much time to sort of experiment, but you don't. I mean, I think I felt even 2 days was a luxury because we we our call time wasn't too crazy early, and we wrapped when we were supposed to wrap. We weren't there till midnight when we were supposed to finish at 6. These sort of things which do happen on smaller projects. We broke lunch break was the correct length, and it felt like there was you get the right people to involved, and it feels like a much more supported production. That no
Yeah.
one is going, well, this is, I can't, and people who are used to larger scale productions weren't feeling it on this by, there's nowhere to sit, there's nothing to eat, there's no runners, all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely, and then everyone just has a nice time, and no one feels
Nice.
like, I think if you're a cinematographer or whatever, you do these smaller projects. But once you get going in your career, you may start working in bigger things, and then you probably don't want to do these anymore because of they're just difficult. They're not
Hmm.
comfortable. Um, our goal was to make it everyone enjoy the time, enjoy the work, and enjoy being there with everybody. Make it a comfortable experience. And that was almost as important as making the film we wanted to make, because as a byproduct of everyone being happy, everyone does their best work, which,
Yes, yeah. It's like a snowball effect that everyone
yeah,
ends up. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And then later on, I'm sure since everybody had such a great time that if you ever called upon any of those people again, excuse me, as my phone goes on the floor, um, if you ever called upon any of those people again, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we had a great time shooting that, so let's do this again."
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, at this type of project when everyone's on a relatively similar s- posi point in their
yes, yeah,
career,
yeah,
people are willing to do this, but they also don't want to have the piss taken, and then no one's a student. Um, uh, you have to work like that with them. And as it happened, the we shot in the middle of the summer, so
mm,
it was bright daylight for the entire shoot, no matter how late we didn't leave when it was dark, and we didn't turn up when it was dark.
yeah,
And so the idea of shooting exteriors we couldn't do
yeah,
because we weren't there at night times. But after watching the first cut, um, the original first shot was the inside with Margaret stood outside the room, that the shot behind her
yeah,
head.
yeah,
Um, and it felt like I think with smaller projects, there's always this thing about scale, and scope, where you feel like you start to realize they really only did have inside. Like, if you turn the camera a fraction to the left, you're shooting off the stage. And I think as soon as you can show that there is more of a world out there, and these characters are going to go into the world, and that world does exist. So
yeah,
we went back a few months later, halfway through the edit, and we shot, me and Ed Curtis, the DOP, did shoot the exteriors, and we were able to go back and shoot those opening exterior and the exterior halfway through. So uh, that was just me and him, but there was no sort of, it was everyone was rooting for the film. So if you needed to go back and do something, people are like, yeah, great, that's fine.
they'd be up for it. Yeah, yeah. And I think that shot showing the exterior like halfway through is a nice little like breather bit to remind people that there's, as you say, there's a world outside of this space.
Yeah, that
And
was
yeah,
that was the idea, and that I added that halfway through because one issue with the script, which is a challenge, and I guess when you have any sort of chamber piece, is it's you don't want it to feel like it's just a continuous one conversation with no kind of beginning or end. So the
yeah,
whole
yeah,
idea of her entering it feeling like it is a contained story with a beginning, and that break was well, the intention of it is you feel like you've moved away and time has passed and you're coming
yeah,
back into them. Whether or not, I know some people don't get that time has that they've maybe been carrying, they've been discussing more while we've been out of the room. If there were other,
mm,
if you had a multiple thread story, at that point you probably cut to what's happening on the streets, and there's some,
Yes.
and then you come back to them. Maybe you cut to the next victim who's in a bar, and then she's been followed by someone, and then you go back to them. It was kind of suggesting that there is other things going on. And originally
Yes.
we
Yeah.
didn't have that exterior, and it just cut to close-ups in the mortuary of jars and things, and then you went back to them, and it was a bit tricky to make that work and make sense, and not for
Yeah.
people to be like, I'm not quite following where, you don't have the convention of cutting to someone else, which you would in a, in something with other scenes. So yeah, that was something that was added in, which the idea was, how do you make a 15-minute scene not feel like just 15 minutes of people.
Yeah. Just constant. Yeah. Yeah. Constant
Yeah,
back and
exactly.
forth. Yeah. Yeah. No. And I think what was so like the main standouts for me were the acting and the cinematography is gorgeous. The lighting is gorgeous. Um, yeah, yeah, incredibly gorgeous actually. Um, and the lighting and the costume really sells the period for it.
Mm.
Um, how did in terms of like a practical aspect, how did you and the DOP create the sort of atmosphere of that room? Because there's great warmth, like candlelight warmth to it throughout, which automatically sells the period. So
Mm.
uh,
Yeah, well, that's great. That was what we were hoping. I think it was creative and practical and
mm,
logistical decisions. The lighting, um, I think, and we kind of informed the grade as well, but there's a sort of look of period pieces on TV which don't work, which is basically they're too lit, whereas it's very bright.
yes,
And I think this was, I think one of the creative appeals of the period is just this dense, kind of oppressive Gothic feeling that wherever you go, it's darkness. It's always raining, and it can get a little bit hammy, but that idea that the environment is also just unpleasant to be around. And always, whenever I'm thinking about this era, it's almost like you feel very, very sad for the people that were alive at the time that they happened to be in this space. There's no
yes,
light, like physical light and like
mm,
emotional light. So it was really just thinking where there will probably be a single source over the table. So let's put that in and let's make it as warm as. That's the thing with this. Like, we didn't do research. We didn't have the time to do the sort of research where we're like, let's go and test period lighting. Like,
yeah,
what really would the light have looked like in 1888 in a very poor area in a mortuary? What would it have been like? So you don't have that luxury of that sort of research. So you think it's probably gaslight or oil lamp, depending on, it was a sort of crossover period at the time.
yes,
Electricity, kind of 20 years later. Um, so yeah, that's probably just a very, very orange warm light. And then as soon as you realize you're doing that, then you just sort of double down into it, and we made the light drop off very quickly. So when Margaret stood out away from the table, she's in darkness. Then
yeah,
there's no light coming through the windows. We once considered that to give backlight, but that's going to be how often at night do you actually get light? You never get light shining in through the window unless it's from a street
yeah,
light. So that just single source suddenly helped create the darkness in the room. I wanted areas to be completely in darkness. So even though the very far end of the room is dressed, depending on also how you're watching this, you aren't seeing a lot of that stuff,
yes, yeah,
but
yeah,
it's there. And then as far as the way that we shot it, this is a 360-degree scene, so the lighting isn't changing. We're not sort of. I think we had a little kicker, and there were some there were some key lights that just very slightly lift depending on the position we were in, but
Yeah, yeah,
we weren't doing changing the lighting setups. We weren't like, right, let's flip to the other side of the table, hour and a half for a lighting setup, which helped the time. So you literally
yeah,
camera other side, dress, move a few things out of the way, crew monitor a few things. Um, so there are practical lights on the wall, like that flicker in the background, and we didn't have
yeah.
enough to dress the whole thing. So every time you get a scene, they're normally like either side of someone's head.
Hmm.
That's always there's only ever like three or four, so we kept having to move them as we shot. Um,
Nice.
so all that timing helps with the number of days you have. Um, but then always wanted to shoot this in a handheld. Basically, we use Succession as our base point for how Succession just finds scenes, and the camera operators don't really know what's happening in the scene. So
Yeah.
it is very deliberately handheld. So that you really did just carry the camera around, and then if somebody wants to take a big step to their right, the idea is that we don't know it's going to happen, which adds to the uneasiness of the scene, and all the lighting and
Definitely.
sound all adds to it. So like if you watch whenever there's ever an action, which there aren't many, but like Bell picks up a crime report, the camera is a beat behind and misses the picking up,
Herbal. Yeah.
which is deliberate, but it's deliberately accidental. So we don't want Ed, who is operating, to be like, right, you never go to an insert of the hand picking the thing up,
No.
which adds to the sense that we are in this room as unfortunately with them, and we don't really know what's happening and where we are, and then it helps inform every decision. So the sound, which is a huge part of it, that uneasiness of the sound, and that there's all these sounds filtering in, and that helped having those set in place when you come to do the sound design. It's just like, well, I you figure out what's going on with the way we shoot this from a sort of tonal point of view. You take that same reasoning and give it to sound and give it to costume and give it to grade, and so you quite easily find how through all the different elements of the film how you create the same uh sort of sense of dread and darkness even in
Yes. Yeah.
costume. It's quite easy to help it inform all those different choices.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's great to hear that was always the intention, and I love all
Yeah.
that. I mean that
Yeah,
like
no. With the handheld style, it adds to the urgency of
yeah.
the situation as well. And the music brilliantly does that as well. The way it builds up and they're sort of fighting back and forth with one another at first, and then
Hmm.
realizing towards the end, going, "Oh, we got something here that we could stop this this monster at the end." Yeah, yeah, yeah. The score was, yeah, gorgeous, gorgeous. Did you
Yeah.
get? Did you get? Who did you get to do that?
So the score's composed by a guy called Matt Scholes, who I met through Jenny D, who's the production designer. So Jenny
Nice.
was helping me make a music video, and I was at the very beginning of this process, and I was like, and Jenny's amazing. And Jenny is sort of a production designer that she just loves what she does. And I was like, we're going to do a Victorian Gothic short film in one room. And then yeah, she was all in. And he was there, and he's a composer. He was like, "Oh, I'll do the music for you." And with composing, I'm always like, I don't have much. Like,
Mm.
um, I can't pay you what you're expecting, or even close to what you're expecting.
Yes, yeah,
But it was you give them enough rope to do what they want. So that was an amazing experience, him composing that, and we worked really closely, and it was really just a case of sharing anything, any examples with each other, and then I would share a bunch of examples with how I thought the music should sound like. And then he would basically sort of match those examples with what he thought it should sound like, and then I would go back and forth and back and forth, and then you sort of highlight three or four reference tracks and go, it's probably this. Um,
Mhm.
and I always knew that I wanted it to feel like you didn't, whether, I'm not sure we totally achieved this, but that idea that you don't always know when sound design and music overlap. So the sound design
Yes.
is quite ambient as well, and there are sounds and drones, and you're like, is that music? And we did end up going for something that's actually quite musical with
Mm.
that theme. And that was something as well because this is a essentially also a proof of concept for the book being adapted. We wanted to show that if there was a motif or there was a theme, these are the ways you could introduce it. So that like quite quick string section at the end, which is borrowed heavily from the "Can You Hear the Music" from Oppenheimer. If you compare those tracks,
Yes.
very
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
very
Yeah.
fast
Yes.
string.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always knew that there's nothing in music that says dread more than a very, very deep cello. So that was that was really the guidance I gave him, and then he just went off and sort of experimenting, and it's great to review music because you're not it's a good lesson as for a director to review music and give notes because you're not like with acting, you're not saying to an actor, well, I mean you could, but you ideally aren't saying you said that too fast, slow it down, because
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very very
No.
specific and it's that's like why is
Yeah.
it too fast or it's too you're too aggressive or and you kind of emotionally try and so you're looking at parts of the music and you're trying to emotionally say, well, I don't think this is sort of at odds with what I'm seeing, or it needs to be more or whatever. And you're not saying the note's gone to minor and it should be major, or that you've gone off
Yes.
and then
Technical.
you discuss that, yeah, and then you come
Mm.
back and or you just go, I need you to just double down on the fear of this bit, like they're terrified, and you try and use the emotional state of the characters like that end scene is a gradual confidence and optimism and working together. And before that, there's unease and there's uncertainty and then he just go away and do it and come back and you say, yeah, that's more what I'm thinking or that's not. And but as well, you want the composer to see this as uh they're composing their own music, but
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
helping them with guidance, but you
Yeah.
want them to take their piece and think I'm really proud of this, not this is just exactly what I was told to make. So Matt's very
Yeah.
proud of it as
Exactly.
a 18-minute piece. And that was the other thing. I wanted it to feel like I wanted there to be almost all music. So when there's a scene in the middle where they're kind of deducing what's happening and there's just consistent music, which was a creative decision to make it feel like we were when you do go silent, that it's the silence is more powerful than we aren't this isn't in a scene of multiple other scenes where you can have no music. This is all it is.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there are bits, they get interrupted at the door and then they sort of collect themselves. It's totally silent, and suddenly the sound of the rain seems to be far stronger than it was before. And like in music, you play with what's not being heard and what's being heard, and you sort
Yes.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
juggle that. And then when you do bring in the motif or a piece or a section, it has more impact because you're being really selective with when you're hearing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and Matt got all that, and he was every time we talked about it, he was like, I understand, totally got it, So very much all his work with me, just sort of saying, I think this is needs to be here and it's not here and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, very
Yes. Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. 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 No. It is. It is. Yeah. It's an absolutely amazing piece, and it really makes. It really puts you into the perspective of the situation and stuff, and builds you up to their final realization. Like, oh, this is a
Mm,
trio here that could solve this. Um, Going back to where you mentioned about giving notes,
mm,
have you always found that easy to give to notes, like to actors, to camera people and stuff? Because as you say, it's like a fine line. You want them
mm,
to to come to their own, and also you don't want to do a line reading, like you say, like say
yeah.
this. quicker, or you need to say it this way. Do you find it easy to give notes?
Um, I find it easy. I think it's really just related to how comfortable I am in their craft. So
Yes.
giving notes to the camera department, I'm like I was a camera operator for 5 years and I've
Yeah.
shot things and so I am most comfortable talking to the DOP. That's so that's fine. Um, Acting is a discipline which is hard to understand unless I think you've done it yourself. And
Hmm.
I know I've given notes before where the facial expression as a response is I've just confused you, and there's
Yes.
and I think the issue is it's just how much time you've done it. Like when you're directing, certainly if you're all your projects are sort of self-generated and you're like how much time have you actually spent with an actor in the moment in between takes? I mean, like barely any compared to me and with cameras and then anything in that's post you can just discuss for days, but with an actor you've got they're in a moment, they're in a space, they are the most important element at that exact moment is their performance. And cut, you've got a rhythm going, spring up, give them a note. If it's confusing, muddled, not clear, you then suddenly you've taken them out of this headspace. And so there's an awful lot of pressure. Um, so no, I think it's always difficult. I think,
Yeah.
and I find what I've started doing is beforehand just talking to the actors and just asking them how best did they want to work, what do they work, if I go over and start talking to you, do you just need like really quick notes, or do you want to come out this do you want to come out, or and all that sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, it boiled down that a director on set is surely the well-being and the looking after the actors, both mentally and also their performance, is really the most important thing, because there is no one else on a set to help you like direct the actors. Whereas you've got your AD that's going to do lots of things. The cinematographer can talk to they already know what they're doing. Basically, you can say, point it that way, you figure the rest out, and they'll get it. No one helps
Yes.
you as
Yeah.
an actor. And on this, you suddenly, the bit I became most aware of gaps in the production was when you realize the actors have been stood up around this one table for a long time waiting, and you can sense that they're not in between takes. They're just standing still. They're not really talking to each other. And then you're like, yeah, you may be going off and talking to the soundy and the cinematographer and all these people, and so and each one of them is different. And so yeah, and I know the people I speak to who I feel way more comfortable talking to, who I'm like really
Yeah.
interested in talking to. And with actors I'm still figuring out how best to, and you
Yeah.
hear you hear some directors, that I think there's a thing that if they give a perfect take and you think that's perfect, that's great. Then you go over there and you've got to say something. You want another one, but you just go over and you just say, and you try and attempt to justify why you want another one, but maybe try and you could, this, and all you really want them to do is just do it again, but you give like the simplest note, but do it again. We've got that, but this time, whereas you were frustrated then, let's just say you are like dial it up by three. You're on the
Yeah.
verge of losing it. And then understanding that you can take bits of it and you can do things with it. Or just say, just let's just try something different, just go for broke, and if you were an actor and you did what you thought was best, then you got the director come over and said, that's perfect. This time you are even more pissed off, and that's it. You would go, okay, I've got that. I can understand.
That. Yeah.
But if it's, and I'm I do feel like that if you've done enough prep and the people are invested in the characters, their interpretation of that line, as long as it aligns with technically, so you were off your mark or you were blocked. As long
Yeah,
as
yeah.
it's technical, as long as they said the right words and it fits with what you're next shooting, um, as long as all that works, how they've delivered the performance is probably spot on if they understand the character, they understand the tone, they understand the piece. So if you have nothing to say to them, then they are probably right. And I think that's always one that, unless you're going for something really specific and you want to hear a word said, and then really it's not up to them
In a
anymore.
certain way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a lot of directors, which I like the style of working with actors that you do all the work up front. You really set them up, you build them up, and then you let them deliver the line, and it's probably right, you know. And then unless it's sort of somebody said one in somebody was say like an 8, and then the response was a 4, and then it's a bit uneven. All you're supposed to do is kind of iron that out. In the same way, if you say to a cinematographer, hold this single, and then it starts becoming dirty and out of focus, you could go, I need you to hold it. But you're not, if they're doing it, then it's correct.
Yes.
Camera operator, not you. So I think you can over engineer notes where if you're giving lots of notes and needing to give them lots, then it might be a case that you don't have the right person, they're not fully
Yeah.
there, which
Yes. Yeah.
could have
Yeah.
been something from before, or yeah, you haven't had the right amount of prep time, and so yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
An
And I
interesting.
guess, and I guess that that comes down to like casting and like
Hmm.
uh in terms of like I remember when I casted my grad film that it was very much I had a more well-known person come in and then I didn't cast him and then my lecturer was like, why didn't you do that? And I was like, because I felt I got on better with the guy before or the guy after.
Hmm.
It was yeah, so yeah, I guess it's to know that you can have those conversations without either of you getting like,
Hmm.
upset with one another. And the last
Yeah,
thing you want to do is to be giving so many notes that they're completely deflated because they're like, I'm not giving you what you need from me. And also,
yeah, exactly. And
yeah,
yeah, the you shouldn't be giving lots of notes. I feel like if you're giving loads of notes and you're needing to do more than, certainly on a small project, if you're needing to do more than 2 takes, you do one take, give notes, do another take. You have to do another take with more notes. That's probably means something's gone wrong in,
yes,
in prep. You know, with this sort of thing, we're basically doing, say, 4 pages. From one position, you do 4 pages up to a point where there's a break and the blocking or something. So you run those pages, and then you're going to flip the camera and do it again. Um, so you can't do more than 3 takes
yeah,
top. If you do want to do a third, you're probably only going in for a specific line.
mm,
So yeah, you don't have that choice, and lots of it's very well known that if you cast well and you spend all that time with them, if we had rehearsed, if we had spent our day rehearsing that I wanted, we had thrashed out the scene so it was in people's heads, but also we'd ironed out all the kinks in it. I think we would have done it even quicker, and I think it would have been more
yeah,
effective. I think any bits of this where the acting feels like forced or it's a little bit bumpy, whereas other bits, there are bits
yeah,
I love and bits that I go, oh, if we had had a day rehearsing that section, the script would have changed, the performance would have changed, and it just would have felt, it could have been some of Lauren's parts where she's getting really emotional and she's getting upset at how Belle and Doyle are
mm,
treating her. I think she did an amazing job, but those were the very first time she'd ever done that. One of the takes,
yes,
I think, is the first time she'd probably done it, unless she, her own rehearsal. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
just on something with this scale and this the ambition of this with the look and the feel. You're essentially doing a TV series scene with a huge, much bigger budget than we had. The idea of not rehearsing it and not spending a week rehearsing it is crazy. And you and
yes,
other actors would have gone, I'm not doing this if I've not rehearsed it. Like, I'll get it wrong. I think if the day we shot was the rehearsal, then I would have said, I think we're getting there. We're not
yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah,
not we're not bang on yet, but we're really close. But as you
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah,
rehearse and you don't have many takes, what you get is, well, that's as close as I think we're going to get. So let's
Mhm.
move on. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so then you look at it and you think, yeah, it's great. Like I'm happy with how it turned out, but any notes I've got or any criticism or thoughts anyone else has, I go, well, we didn't rehearse. We didn't have time um to discuss the scenes in person in more detail, see how they
yeah.
sounded, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, which is a limitation of the size of the project.
Yeah.
Um,
And loads of people say that nowadays that there's barely any luxury to do any of that back and forth, like
yeah.
depending on the budget. So even yeah, no, yeah. Um I I don't want to keep you much longer, but I'll you said about that the movie's like a proof of
Mm,
concept.
yeah.
Is that what you're thinking about maybe adapting the entire book in the future?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the idea.
brilliant.
Yeah, so
Brilliant. That'll be exciting.
we're writing a series based on the book, um,
Okay, brilliant.
which is
Series. Nice.
yeah we are currently writing it as a mini series, but split the book into thirds and write it as a three-part 1 hour mini.
Yeah.
The so the film Leviathan is basically both a short film and a proof of concept. So it forms
Yeah.
part of the proposition as this is a series with these characters and
Yes,
uh,
yeah.
so yeah, so that's yeah, we'll see. It's a tough pitch with a period piece.
Mm,
But we'll see how that goes. So that's in progress at the moment.
cool.
I
That's
think
crazy
it
exciting.
yeah, it is. I mean, I'm
Okay.
really happy we got to make this film
Yeah.
as a piece, and we have adapted the book in some degree.
Yes,
But I think the idea of seeing where these characters would go, where they come from, where they go. That's where I like the fact that we find them clearly in the middle of their story. That that there's clearly been some sort of disagreement beforehand, and they've said no, Margaret, you can't come in, and so then this is a turning point where they think right, so enough is enough. These women are being killed in East London in Whitechapel, so now let's head out together and do this. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so and that's why the film can also feel like it doesn't really properly end. It ends at the
Mm,
beginning. It was more made as a proof of concept, and and
yeah.
and it's packaged as a complete short film, which is also why the closing credits uh that have the montage of the Victorian illustrations is,
Yes, yeah.
the idea is that is basically our opening title sequence.
Urban Town, yeah.
Um,
That's beautiful, by the way.
oh yeah,
They are gorgeous looking as well. Yeah,
yeah.
no.
If you watch Disney's A Thousand Blows, which is a brilliant show,
Yeah, yeah, that's on my list. I haven't got around to
yeah,
watching that yet.
you should
So,
watch that. Their opening title sequence is
okay.
very close to that with
Oh, nice.
because that I think what's famous if you look up anything about Jack the Ripper, the press and the tabloids at the time,
Mm,
it's all kind of
mm.
there were no the only Mary Kelly's body, which is the fifth victim, had a photograph. So there's no photographs, there's no crime scene photographs other than the last one, which is a horrible image.
Yeah, it
So it's
is.
all depicted, yeah, through illustrations. So seeing the world and that again, showing that at the end is another way of showing the world is out there. Victorian
Yeah,
London is outside the walls, which is why only two or three of those images actually relate to Jack the Ripper. That's also a budget thing because licensing those images was
yeah,
too much. So then they're
of
all
course.
just like I think the first one is Waterloo Bridge, and then there's just people in Victorian London being themselves, uh, which gives you the sense that this is a world that we could inhabit and we could be in. And a part of the pitch and part of the idea is yes, this is about three people on the case of Jack the Ripper. It's not explicitly a Sherlock Holmes story that's all about the case. It's more so about existing in the era,
Mm,
society, and history has come to, I think, understand Jack the Ripper more so in it's less important who did it who frankly cares who he was? He would be
Yeah.
somebody. We'll never know. There's a bunch of people that it looks likely, but everyone seems to think it's someone else.
Yeah.
Every other day, you see a newspaper article that's saying we found him, and it's like, okay, fine. What's far more interesting is thinking about which is kind of what Margaret represents in the film, which is yes, at the time it would be important to stop him, so he can't do it anymore. But now it's far more interesting and worthwhile to look at how society was able to let these women get in a place where this would happen to them. And
Yes.
if you a very good book recommendation on the subject is The Five by Hallie Rubenhold, and it's a book which is about the canonical five women, and she's the first historian to ever research their lives in a huge amount of detail, and their stories end at the point that they meet Jack the Ripper. There's no
Okay.
speculation on who did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You find that only one of them was actually a sex worker
Yes.
from the
Yeah.
beginning. One of them was they were all married. Some of them had very prosperous jobs and opportunities, and somehow through society, through alcoholism, through lack of support, through that if you weren't working, if you weren't married, you were probably an alcoholic. That's how everyone saw
Yeah.
you.
It was.
Um, that's and they were and not through no fault of their own. They were allowed. They were in a point where something like Jack the Ripper, who is really the sort of what was wrong with society at the time,
Yeah.
was able to murder them. That's far more interesting as a to study than
And who it
it was
was.
a member of the royal family. It was this, and so
Yeah.
Margaret's
Exactly.
a lot of Margaret's dialogue comes from wanting to reinforce that she represents what's wrong with, and like she never calls Catherine O'Hara as a victim. She always calls her by her name, where they call her a victim and the body and all this, and they see it
Mm.
as a challenge. They see it as a mystery to solve, and she sees it as this was a real person who had a life, So that's that's where a fresh adaptation of this would have to go,
Yes.
considering Sherlock Holmes, Jack the Ripper, and Victoria London are all well mined and everyone's seen
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put them
Yes.
together, put Margaret at the center of it. This is Margaret's story. In the book, it's more about the three of them, but in this film, we're with Margaret. Um, and introduce the world to Margaret Harkness. Not many people know who she is. There's no photographs of her, but she was a
Mm.
prolific writer that wrote about the problems of East End London in the time. So it seems perfect for a for
No. Yeah.
for adaptation and
Adaptation. No.
so yeah, we'll see. That's
Cool. Yeah.
exciting. But yeah, it was great to actually get the film made and have a piece at
Yeah. To
we
show.
didn't just want to attempt to adapt the book. It's like, well, if we could actually, the book is adapted in a form of a short film, but you could take that somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, mine it. Yeah, yeah, some more
Exactly.
and stuff. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming to talk about it. I really it's been really interesting. And also Jack the Ripper's so up my street. So